Hi, I'm Professor Green, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 2, Organizational Behavior, by Dr. Ul Ben, the textbook. So the learning objectives for this chapter are first to describe what strategy is and how it works. You may or may not have had a course yet in strategy, so we'll kind of briefly review that just because it has such an influence on what we do in human resources and organizational behavior. Then we're going to explain how organizations are structured to fit with the environment. And then lastly, we're going to understand how organizational culture affects people and performance. So we'll break in this chapter into 3 different videos. And the first part, we'll talk about strategy. Here that we say that, OB isn't just about people and their personalities, as we spoke about in chapter 1, but it's also about understanding organizations and how they drive behavior within them. So the idea is that we have to understand people, but we also have to understand the organization and the mission and the strategy that it comes with, and then how those 2 things can work together. So let's first describe what strategy is and how it works. We're going to explain here what strategy is, why we need to pay attention to it. I think if you signed up for business school, you already have an idea that it is important. And we're going to describe the change process and how it is enabled, because human resources and organizational behavior are usually the drivers and the managers of organizational change. Then we're going to recognize how to overcome burnout and stress associated with too much change, right? Because as we say, change is a regular thing in today's working environment, in today's society, but it can really stress us out after a while. It's the human condition. So what is strategy? It's a plan that lays out how an organization will allocate resources to achieve their goals. When effective, strategies clarify how organizational priorities align with the company's vision, mission, and values. So again, they're big picture goals and how they're going to accomplish those goals. And then we have things in there that help motivate us and articulate the goals, which are things about vision and mission. And those things are the values. With respect to OB, strategies are used to set direction and purpose so that members know where the organization is heading and how it plans to get there. Executive leadership and the strategic apex. So strategy is the primary job right of the top leadership, or they call it in this book, the strategic apex, who are responsible for managing the organization's relationship to the external environment. And we'll look at a diagram in a couple of slides as to how they kind of articulate what the external environment is, and as well as the internal environment, and work towards to creating this strategy. Especially the CEO focuses almost solely on strategy formation, setting the mission, vision, and direction consistent with the organizational values. So maybe you'll think about your family, where you grew up, your parents, hopefully, were the CEOs of the organization, and they were constantly thinking about big picture, how we were going to move this family forward. Or maybe you're thinking about a part-time job you had in high school. Who was the CEO? What were they doing on a regular basis? And, hopefully they were thinking about big picture things. When I'm a mom, and this summer I'm thinking a lot about, what do I want to accomplish with my child and with my husband? I want to make sure that I expose my child to different skills, different opportunities, different places. Do I want to involve my husband? Do I not? So all these different things that I think about as a mother on a regular basis, I'm setting strategy for my family. When I was an entrepreneur, for 2 years, I produced yoga DVDs that became quite successful. And so when I was the head of my own organization, I was every day working with vendors and employees to talk about, okay, where were we going to move the production of the yoga DVDs forward? How many languages were we going to translate it into? What type of titles did we want? What type of theme and idea did we want? My idea was to do yoga for families, getting lots of different people involved in the yoga practice. So my 2 titles were Yoga for Families and Yoga for Grandparents. And I'll talk more about that. In any case, those are two examples. Managers inside the organization that are responsible for implementation of the strategy, making sure that people inside the organization are aligned with the strategic direction. And this is very often where you will be as managers, especially as new MBAs. You will be there to understand what the strategy is and help implement that. Here is Henry Mitzberg's 5 configurations approach to strategic management. So here we have the strategic apex that we were just speaking about. Then we have you, recent graduates from your MBA, middle level managers, and then you'll be overseeing this, the operating core. These are the people actually who are doing the work. On the sides, we have techno structure. I think of this also as IT, kind of a fancy word, I think, for technology, but you can see it's a big piece. When I was at Citibank, 20% of the employees employed at Citibank were working in IT because it's such a big part of how we do business every day. And then we have support staff. So these are the, the administrative assistants, the program directors. These are the people that really help us do what we do every day as middle level managers. And management by objectives. So in most organizations, strategy trickles down in a process called management by objectives, MBO. It's a performance management system that drives results by specifying objectives and aligning employee performance and accountability. So if you've ever had a performance review, you are critiqued on what are the objectives for the organization. When I get critiqued here at LMU, I get critiqued by the student evaluations. I get critiqued by making sure that students are learning. I get critiqued by efficiently and clearly communicating learning objectives within the classroom. So, right, we want to make sure that that's what HR's job is, right? To make sure that employees get their feedback according to what the strategy is. Top managers set the strategic objectives and middle managers hold employees accountable to them. Middle managers also supervise the activities of the operating core to drive performance with the support of the techno structure and support staff, as I mentioned in the previous slide. The modern day version of modern management by objectives, MBO, is strategic planning. That's really the term that you'll hear more often these days. It sets the strategic direction of the organization and makes decisions on how to allocate resources. It's a core part of the strategic management process, the method through which managers conceive and implement a strategy that can lead to a sustainable competitive advantage, right? Again, keywords that you've hopefully heard throughout your MBA so far. I'm going to go ahead and do slideshow mode for this one because it's so small. So this is the process that I mentioned a few slides ago. This is the identification of the mission, value, and vision. And how that comes together is an analysis. So you may hire consultants, people who are very good at critical thinking, to analyze the external and the internal environment, what's important for the organization today. And then they establish these long-term objectives. Then they generate evaluation and selection of strategies. They implement the strategies, and then they measure and evaluate the strategies. And even though these are like big terms, big words, this is actually how it gets done on a regular basis. And I was at Citi, one of the largest organizations in the world. This is what we would hear continuously, right? What is the mission? But for my level, we were always looking and seeing how we're going to implement the strategies, and then how are we going to evaluate that. And those change, obviously, with time. In banking, especially in IT, security is a big strategy, making sure that all the money is secure. And so that took up a lot of our time, making sure that nobody could hack into the banking systems. We also were concerned with Sarbanes-Oxley and making sure that different parts of the banks actually didn't communicate, because there was kind of a lot of fraud and a lot of insider trading that was going on in the early 2000s. And so we had a lot of strategy and regulations around making sure that the investment banking side didn't communicate lots of information to the consumer banking side, et cetera. So every organization has different strategies and priorities. Strategic thinking helps support the advancement of an organization by contributing to competitive positioning and efficient execution of these priorities. They proactively position the organization by using future thinking techniques, trend analysis, right? Again, what are the trends, right? Is it security? Is it insider trading? And regulations against that? Is it work from home? Is it work-life balance, et cetera? Boundary spanning. So making sure that, people's, how big are these boundaries? Initiative taking. So again, how can employees take the initiative to do what they need to do every day? How can we develop innovation? How can we come up with new ideas within the organization? And how can we be adaptable to different changes within the organization, especially when we had the pandemic, right? We had to adapt very, very quickly. And so CEOs were spending a lot of time thinking about how strategically they could be adaptable, right? There's an example that I teach in business ethics about a company in Sicily, in Italy, that produced diapers and a lot of paper products before the pandemic. And then they switched and they were adaptable and they started making masks and gowns and different other paper products that were necessary for the pandemic. So again, those were senior managers who were making those big decisions. Organizational change. This is a key term, one of my favorites. It's a process through which an organization alters its strategy, structure, or culture to enhance performance and sustainability. It's closely related to the concept of adaptability and the ability to adjust to new conditions. It means having flexible and fluid strategies, structures that allow organizations to shift quickly and efficiently in response to dynamic market conditions. So again, yes, we can think of the pandemic, but we can also think of, I often think of mergers and acquisitions when we think about organizational change. That was more of the modus operandi when I was a recent grad, that at Citi, we were very quickly acquiring smaller banks. And so there was constant change, or the technology was changing very quickly with data centers and different things. And so we had to shift our priority. Was the data center going to be in New Jersey or in Texas, right? It really depended on cost and technology, et cetera, things like this. So lots of different organizational change opportunities for people who work in organizational behavior. We're going to do about 6 or 7 more slides, and then we'll be done with this first part of chapter 2. Organization agility, right? So the word agility, how quickly, how easily you can change. So how can you renew, adapt in a rapidly changing, turbulent, and uncertain environment? So you need 2 things: dynamic capability, the ability to move fast and respond to changes. So that's, again, why a key HR person is key to an organization, right? They get paid big bucks. The chief human resources officer, CHRO, sometimes they're called. So she or he, very often a she, has skills that allows to organizations to move and respond very quickly. Again, they were called upon very, very often when the pandemic hit. And then a stable operating core. So a strong operating core that consistently generates productivity and results. So even though you're changing because of the pandemic, or you're changing because of work from home policies, you still have to have this core where people are still doing what they need to do every day, right? Salesforce.com, they still need to be implementing and producing new software. General Electric, they still need to be producing and innovating new technologies. So here's this model of leading change. And again, I'll make this big. So it's a prominent model of leading organizational change that is proposed by John Kotter at Harvard, because as we said in this course, we talk a lot about theories as well that have been proven. This is the science that helps leaders implement change and implement organizational behavior methodologies. So first, we have create a sense of urgency. So people start to understand, yes, actually, we need this change, and this is going to have to happen. So let's talk about, not about the pandemic, because we're kind of tired about talking about in some ways, but talking about acquiring a new bank, for example, this new smaller bank. So we're realizing that, we need to acquire, at my time, it was Smith Barney got acquired by Citibank. So now we build a guiding coalition. So you get people together who are on board, and they start coming up with ways to implement the change, but they are kind of the champions, the leaders for this. We form a strategic vision and initiatives. We say, okay, we really like Smith Barney to be part of Citibank. This is the vision. This is how we're going to implement this. How we're going to do that is create these certain initiatives to start that. We're going to enlist a volunteer army. So again, these are like a subset of those champions. So the people within the organization who really understand what the change means, and they're going to be able to talk to other employees who work around them to talk to them about how this change is going to happen. This also happened here at LMU. The last couple of months, we had to switch healthcare systems. And so we have a handful of people who need to then talk to the professors, talk to the staff about how the new healthcare system provider is going to be implemented. We enable action by removing barriers. So if people have issues, if they need to move their office, if they need money to if they had to have a retreat to talk about how they're going to work with these new people in this new bank, lots of different things about making sure that anything that needs to happen to make this change, that there's nothing that's stopping in our way. We're going to generate some short-term wins so people feel happy about what's happening, right? Because this is a big change to acquire a different bank. We're going to maybe, have these retreats with senior management. We're going to, move a handful of people from Smith Barney into the Citigroup offices. We're going to start to sustain this acceleration so that people feel like, again, that we're moving forward. And then finally, we're going to institute the complete change. And so, as you can see, this is a science, right? We don't just say one day that, okay, Smith Barney is part of Citibank, or Citigroup at the time. This is a long process to make sure that there's buy-in, to make sure that it's implemented correctly. I'm sure you can think of many times when there was a change happening in your family or in your life or in your job when it wasn't. And that has changed things, or there was a divorce, right? So yeah, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. Consequences of change, stress and burnout, right? And so when I was hired at Citibank in 2003, that they were looking for people who were thriving on change because there was so much change, and they knew that if they hired people who didn't like change, they would get stressed and burnt out very, very quickly. So they needed people who really actually enjoyed this type of environment. So, and that here in this day and age, we have unprecedented levels of stress and burnout. As you can see, even at LMU, our mental health facility has grown and escalated. Our community of care is used on a regular basis. So the key challenge for organizations is figuring out how to now enable adaptability and change while still keeping employees and leaders productive, motivated, and energized. Again, this is a key function of human resources and organizational behavior. Let's talk a little bit about the stress response. So here is where problems occur when change generates feelings of insecurity, hopelessness, or being out of control. This generates the stress response, or the activation of the fight, flight, freeze response, which it's a survival mechanism that enables people to act quickly in threatening situation. So either stay and deal, run away, or not move or act and freeze. But it's activated by a stressor and a threat that a person feels unable or unprepared to overcome, right? So it allows them to not work as efficiently, to not be as productive, etc. So common signs of distress, things to watch for, include increased irritability of your employees, anger, them lashing out, fatigue or withdrawal, absenteeism and turnover. This is a problem, right? That now people don't want to come to work and the productivity drops, lack of energy, reduced social interaction, memory lapses, loss of concentration, emotional sensitivity, loss of emotional control, spreading gossip or misinformation about the change. So you might want to think about an opportunity, because I love change, but where there was a time in one of your jobs where there was some change and people started to gossip and worry about it. That, right, it's a lot of stress. It can be a lot of stress for a lot of people. They have a lot of identification with their jobs. So if that is unsure, then they spend a lot of time and energy thinking about the change and not actually working. A commonly recommended way to stress is by increasing resilience. And you'll hear a lot about this too with people in your everyday life. This is what I mean, like these things are valuable for life even outside of the workplace. Even my son, we try and teach him resilience, adapting well in the face of adversity, the ability to bounce back. How can we develop our resilience? Looks like people being able to recover and grow in the face of adverse experiences. From the inside, it means being able to calm oneself and practice the relaxation response, the signaling to the body that danger is no longer present, to return this parasympathetic nervous system to normal. And then you can be efficient, you can be productive, you can make decisions in a more logical way. All of us feel burnt out and stressed at times. Stress is normal, but when it gets to be too extreme or too continual, it can lead to burnout. It's physical, emotional exhaustion by excessive stress. People who experience it emotionally and physically drained to keep up, hopeless, resentful, and inhibited from being productive. So this is how it relates to organizations for the most part, right? Why are organizations so concerned about people being burnt out? Because then they're not making money for the organization. And they care, right? And they care about their employees, hopefully. So being a critical thinker. So we want to be fair. As we looked at in chapter 1, those key items, right? How fair is it for employers and managers to now expect workers to be accessible at all times? Do workers have a right to say no to after work hours, right? What is fair? Go deep. Whose problem is this really? How extensive is it? Will it fix itself? What other ramifications could you experience in the long term? Use your logic. How would you solve this problem? Is legislation the right answer? Should you look to the law? Do you agree that legislation will cause backlash or exacerbate the problem rather than making it better? The most effective organizational change takes the form of the organizational renewal, an ongoing process of building innovation and adaptability into the organization. So senior level organization leaders are constantly looking at, how can we make our organization adaptable? How can we bring innovation? How can we change very quickly? How can we be resilient? So organizations that renew themselves effectively view and manage change as an ongoing rather than a disruptive process, as I said. Being effective at renewal involves overcoming problems of entropy, a process from physics which states that all systems will run down over time unless they are maintained, right? So we all need rest. We all need times when we are not changing. Overcoming entropy requires being willing to change by continuously promoting conditions for organizational adaptability through strong executive sponsorship. This is one of my passions in life, right? Communicating continuously from senior level CEO and letting the employees know what's happening. So, and making sure that all that communication is aligned with the organizational strategy. Now, Dean Smith is talking a lot about this inspirational paradigm, which is a motto or theme idea by the Jesuit business schools. And so she'll talk a lot about that, how we try and instill Jesuit values into our teachings every day. And so she continuously, in all her communications, refers a lot to the Jesuit values, ethics, etc. There's a culture and individual willingness to adapt and change continually examining new information, adopting new behaviors and approaches, using every opportunity to message how adaptability and change will help the enterprise and its members and not hurt it. The rewards and consequences, so reinforcing adaptive action and change with rewards and consequences. So if you adapt to this change, you get rewarded. So if, you know, I get to, this weekend, I'm going to the Jesuit conference, and I get rewarded by having the university pay for that, my expenses, my meals, my stay in the dorms, etc., because they want me to learn more about Jesuit values in business schools. So that's it. I'm not going to go through the study guide because that is for you to review before the quiz. But let's go ahead and take a break from this video, and we'll move on to part 2 of chapter 2. I'm Professor Green.